Rollins is running. I heard her on the radio this morning before I went on Ben Sarrow's program this morning, but
And Doug Holman.
and Doug Holman. Okay, yes, but hopefully there was a nice turnout, where at least some people showed up and voted.
Oh, yeah.
The attendance at some of our polls seems to be down, but I think with the enthusiasm that I'm seeing around at the different Republican committees in the state, we're going to have a better turnout. It may even be a larger turnout than anticipated in the past years. So that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're working for. It's a great time to be a Republican because, quite honestly, we have the right ideas and we know where our country should be going. It was Republican values and principles that elevated this country to where it is today. And so, but it also means that it's very important that we be Republicans, that we not shy away from the platform, that we embrace it and articulate it well, because when we do that, we win the hearts and minds and souls of our citizens around the United States. So don't be afraid of that platform. That platform is one of the best things that distinguishes us from anybody else. And I'm 100% behind you here in New Hampshire. So that's one of my hallmarks, I think. Besides the other things that make me a little different from the other candidates, I'm the only woman. I'm the shortest one, and I'm also, I think, the best looking. So, but just to back up a little bit, my family came from, we actually grew up in California. My husband and I met in junior college, but we came from a farming community in the San Joaquin Valley. And I say that I picked him up because we were at a college mixer. I was walking across the yard, and the people I knew weren't there anymore, so I just went ahead and went up to this group that I was headed towards, and he happened to be in there with them. So he said, you know, who is this strange person? But at any rate, it took me a while before I finally captured him. But he went into the Air Force. My father actually served in World War II in the 442nd. And David served in the Air Force as a U.S. As a pilot. We have 4 children. Our 3 of the 4 actually serve or have served in the Air Force, the Navy, and the Coast Guard. And the only place that we're missing at that point is the Marines. And while he was on an exchange with Australia, I was the Marine mom, so I think I have it covered at that point too. But at any rate, we're in a lot of trouble right now in our country. We're on the precipice, I think, right at the pinnacle that we can go either way this coming election, and why it is so very, very important for us to elect a moral, strong conservative, someone who isn't going to falter on the issues. And that's why I'm running, is because I've been working in the trenches for the last 20 years since I got to New Hampshire to actually empower you, the voter, on how to get your voice heard at the various levels of public policy. And so I will be standing very strong on the Constitution. I will be fighting for your gun rights. I'll be fighting for your Bill of Rights, which I think we're even watching those go by the wayside with the intrusion by those departments that have 3 letters to their names. And, you know, one of the things that I think is very concerning is that Jean Shaheen, we know she wrote at least 2 letters, but how many other bits of communication went on between her and the IRS to make sure that we control the opposition and what they're thinking. If you look at Obamacare, we know it's not about insurance. We know it's really not about covering those who are not covered. We know it's not about health, but it really is a tax that is used to control the citizens and make sure that we line up with the thinking that our current leadership wants us to be in. So, that being said, I think we have to repeal it. We have to defund it. I don't think there's any way we can replace it. There's some things that we're going to have to work very, very hard to undo because they've already been implemented. But really where healthcare belongs is here in the state, so that New Hampshire can put together a plan that is specific for New Hampshire. It's not one that's dictated from the centralized government that tells everybody who they have to buy from, what they have to have covered, and all of those things. So we, as a senator, that would be my number one responsibility, is to go down to Washington and make sure that we get the Washington central government back in line with the Constitution, so that it's only doing those things that is enumerated in the Constitution. National defense, making sure that we have a good infrastructure, and then finally making sure that we can trade across state lines and across national, international lines fairly, predictably, and honestly. One of the biggest problems we have, not only in New Hampshire, but also nationally, is that we have one of the highest corporate taxes there are going. So we need to figure out how to get that down so that we are more friendly to our small businesses. I'm not so worried about the big corporations, but I am worried about our small businesses, because those are the people who grow the jobs. Those are the people who are going to give us a robust economy. And so that's another area that I really think needs to be addressed. And finally, the third place that I would really like to see us enhance at this point is to make sure that we have a strong national defense. Our military right now is being revamped and reorganized and defunded and all kinds of things that are going on with it. But Reagan said a strong defense will bring us peace, and that's still true. I mean, when you have bullies in Washington, D.C. that are pushing you in one direction or the other, you need somebody that's going to stand up and say, no, we're not going to go any further. And it's the same thing as pushing against the bullies on the playground. You have to have a strong stance that says, no, we're not going this way. May not win all the battles, but at least you can push back, and that's what we really need to do. So with that, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, what you might have in the way of concerns, and if I can answer any questions for you, I'd be happy to. Yes?
You're saying you're from the San Joaquin Valley.
Yes.
And among one of the three major things I have problems with the Obamacare, want that gone. Frank thought I want that gone.
Cindy.
Corporate tax, but the one thing is the EPA.
Yes.
Have you, since you're from the San Joaquin Valley, I take it you paid attention to what's been going on to the San Joaquin Valley?
Absolutely, absolutely. The fact that they won't let the water go down for the farmer communities so they can protect this little known type of fish that I don't know what value it does. It does control. It's a matter of control. The EPA has a lot of rules and regulations that do nothing more than control our property and what we can do with it. And so, absolutely, I'm aware of it. So,
do you know how much of the American produce did come out of the San Joaquin Valley?
it was, what, 70 or 80%? It's a huge amount that comes out of San Joaquin Valley. We, that's one of the things that growing up there that we do miss, is that my husband's family was in, his father actually owned a farming equipment, and many times he used to get paid with crates of fresh fruits and so forth, and of course it was fresh off the vine kind of thing, so we kind of missed that. But yes, I'm very much aware that that needs to be done. But one of the things that we need to do too is, if we look at our overall budget, it's 68% of that budget right now is spent on health, education, welfare, and pensions. So if we're really going to be serious about limiting the size of government, that means there's some departments in Washington, D.C. that need to be closed or at least significantly reduced. And I say closed because they're really out of the purview of the Constitution and what they're supposed to be doing. So one of them is the EPA needs to be closed. If you look at their track record, and it's not that we need to have another study committee to see how they're performing, we already know how they're performing. You look at the Department of Education, and when it was established in '79, it was supposed to make us more competitive internationally with in science and math. And where are we in science and math internationally at this point? Way down at the bottom. And it's a real crime on what we are doing to our students. So it's something that all we're doing is pouring more and more money, and all they're doing is sending us more and more regulations to say, how are you going to do this, and what curriculum do you need to teach, and what tests do we need to have you give. So I have a real problem with that. Yes, sir.
So would you walk over there and turn off the lights and tell everybody to clean out their desks?
I would really like to lead that charge, absolutely, because it's just someplace that we keep paying people to do nothing.
Seriously,
I'm serious.
how would you rein in the Department of Education?
I think you have to close it. I think you lead a campaign to close it. There are people all over this state that are well aware that we need to close the Department of Education, because whenever I mention that, whenever anybody mentions it, it doesn't matter who's up there, you get the biggest supply line. So people are well aware that it needs to be closed, and that we would save a whole lot of money out of doing that. Yes, sir.
You talked earlier about the platform.
Yes.
I actually took the detailed time to read that, and you're right. I think it's a great platform. I don't think it's articulated particularly well to the citizens, but that's another story. But what you're saying about DC, I think, is great. So my question to you is, how would you build a coalition to, in essence, do what needs to be done, and that's dismantle Washington, D.C.? Because that's the problem with this country.
Exactly. So you have to find other senators that are willing to take that task on, okay? We have 3 or 4 right now that are sitting senators that is, at least they've been taking a whole lot of bullets in the back for standing up and saying something's wrong here, we need to fix it. If we get 6 more senators there, we have 10 senators that can argue with the other 8 that keep pushing us and saying, oh no, you need to buy amnesty or whatever it is. If we can do that. Now there are, and that means that we have to work not just for New Hampshire, but for other states as well. There are several different candidates that I'm aware of who are strong constitutional candidates. One is Rob Dennis out of Louisiana, Paul Brown out of Georgia. So Joni Ernst is out of Iowa, but I understand too that the Democrat out of Iowa is challenging her as well, is also a strong conservative. He's not your typical Democrat. But if we were to get 6 more solid votes in the Senate, that'd be 10% of the Senate. And you know what? We can do a whole lot with that 10%.
Are these the type of people that Mitch McConnell wants to crush and destroy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because they're standing up and saying this is what's wrong. And Ronald Reagan said, the answers are not easy, but they are simple. It just takes the courage to do what is morally right. And so we need to make sure that the people we're sending to our public offices have a moral compass, that they know right and wrong, and that they believe that there's an absolute right and wrong. And that's why I'm standing before you. Again, yeah.
Now, you say your father was in 442nd Infantry,
Yes.
World War II. Now, was he interned in an internment camp?
No, he wasn't, but my uncle was.
Your uncle was.
My uncle was. And my uncle actually came out of the internment camp, served, and then went back until they released him.
Wow.
Now, my grandfather, who was a pastor at the time, and it's kind of interesting because he served he was in Colorado at the time, and he convinced Governor Carr to open up Colorado to allow the Japanese internees to relocate them. So he was very involved in that. And when I went back, he actually served in a Methodist parish for 19 years. That's almost unheard of. because usually they move you every 3 to 4 years in this church. So it's kind of neat.
Well, it's really neat because your family could actually hold a grudge against this country for what happened, but yet you're here telling everyone to be an American.
Absolutely. Well, that's another thing. My grandfather did come over in the late 1800s. And he went to school, went back, got his picture book bride, brought her back, and raised 8 children here. And even though at the time the 8 children were all naturalized citizens, or natural born citizens, but he couldn't apply for naturalization until sometime in the 1950s because he lived in California at that time, and legally you could not apply for citizenship. And even so, we were all taught, this is America. We're proud to be Americans. We're not hyphenated Americans. We are Americans, and we serve and we do whatever we can to make this great nation better. Yes, Cindy.
Yeah, Karen, what are your feelings on NAFTA and CAFTA, I call them the unfair trade agreements?
Yeah, well, we need to have fair trade. And, you know, even when you're talking about maybe revamping the tax code, how do we get it more simple, more fair, make sure that everybody has some skin in the game? I think, I don't care whether you're on welfare or wherever you are, you need to put at least $1 into the tax structure so that you have some involvement in it. I mean, we know that children, all you have to do is look at the kids. When they have to save their pennies and work hard, go out and empty the trash every day or whatever it is in order to buy that Lego set. By golly, that Lego set isn't going to be over here in the trash somewhere or laying around. They'll go and they'll pick up all of those pieces and make sure that they're put in a safe place. If you just give it to them, a lot of times it can be outside under the dirt, who knows where it is. So I really do believe that we need to make sure that everybody pays something into the tax system. But to go to Cindy's question, at one time we operated under tariff systems where we just, all of the goods that came into this country from other places all had a tariff on them, and that's how we funded our government. That's something to look at. I mean, it could be that we just go to a flat tax. That might be where the best and easiest way. There's also the value-added tax, which is basically a sales tax. My biggest problem with that was when we lived in Australia, they hid that tax and you didn't know what it was you were paying or when you were paying it.
That's, yeah, VATs, which fund France, fund Germany. They're sneaky. They're just wrong for an open society.
Right.
I'm sorry, they just are.
I agree. So,
And we wind up with both anyway, progressive and
yeah. And you have to really be careful. We need to go back, and this is more a state matter, but we really need to look at what we're doing here in the state for taxes, because we are gradually building to the point where we're going to have a sales tax. And I was just reading an article that there's a country store over in Vermont that is going to close its doors at the end of this year because of the taxes and the policies that have been instituted over in Vermont in the last couple of years. And they're coming, they said they can't compete when New Hampshire sells like $25,000 in tobacco products compared to their maybe $2,000 simply because we don't charge a whole lot more on our cigarette taxes. And the competitiveness is there. And then they have additional taxes added on to their businesses over there. So they said, this dream that they've had for many, many years to own a family store and run it is going to have to close at the end of this year, which is really sad. But we have to be conscious of that here as well. This 4.2% tax that we just passed for roads, how much of it is really going to get back to the people, to the little small communities? It's a real shame. And the other thing they were talking about was one of the ways that we divide that money, our toll money and our highway money right now is we give it to you because if you have anything to do with the safety on the roads, then we give it to the state police. And it doesn't just go to those officers that are pulling duty on the highways. It goes to all of them. Well, there's now this talk about making Fish and Game legally responsible for ticketing on highways, which will then mean that we can now go in and dip into the road taxes. So we really have to seriously look at that and what we're going to do about it. But one of the things I want you to think about too, when Gene Shaheen comes into the state and says, I've just gotten you a $10 million grant. Okay, what does that mean?
It means we sent them 20 million.
No, it means actually we sent them 14 million. But it means also that 10 million comes here and it has a string attached to it and it's going to tell you how much you have to match it as well. So my thing has always been, before we accept any federal money at all, we have to ask how much is it costing us to get that in the first place. And second of all, if we were to go ahead and accept it, like the Medicaid expansion, how and where are those revenues that going to be set aside so that when that money goes away at the end of 3 years, we have a pocket of money that we can use to replace it? And we rarely, if ever, ask that question. Anyone else?
Well,
Yes.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here.
No, go right ahead.
So, you know, they're making this big deal about war on women.
Yes.
I'm not asking your opinion, but my personal opinion is that Republicans should drop the issue of abortion.
Well,
Simply because
yeah.
my husband and I have 2 adopted children,
Uh-huh.
not a natural born.
And
As an adopted parent, I'm very glad that the biological mother made the choice to have a child.
right.
But I can't condemn a woman who makes the choice not to have a child, because I don't walk in her shoes, and I don't know what happened in her life for her to make that decision. And, you know, I believe in life. I believe it's not a way of birth control.
Or sex selection.
Right. And I think that's a moral issue that we
Right.
should depend on. But as far as making a big issue about it, I don't think you have the right to do that.
Well, we're not going to make a big issue of it, but I will tell you this.
Republicans
Oh.
are.
Well, that's their problem.
Right.
Here's where I stand on it. Fundamentally, it's not an issue to me. I think we need to have a culture of life, because in the Declaration of Independence, it said that we have inalienable rights that come from God. They don't come from man, and man isn't supposed to say one way or the other. But those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the reason they're in that order is because if you don't have life, it doesn't matter. You're not going to have any liberty to fight about, and you're not going to have any property to worry about. So, to me, we have to have this culture of life, which we have had in this country all along. Because Americans fight all the time to go out, and they'll go to great lengths and extent to go uncover some men who have fallen or who have been in a cave, you know, during a mining accident. If we have a little girl fall into one of those culverts or something, we will move mountains to get that little girl out safely. We fight all the time to save and preserve life. And certainly I think we have to have that attitude where we are nurturing life into existence, because the other part of the downside of not preserving and encouraging life is that that's the next generation. And if we don't have 2.1 children per woman in our reproductive cycles, then we can't replace ourselves. And if we want our society to continue, we have to have multiple children. And so I applaud those ladies that are out there having a dozen kids, because there are a bunch of them in New Hampshire. And but there's certainly other things that we can do to foster the encouragement that, you know, adoption is a wonderful opportunity, and there are a lot of families out here who would dearly love to adopt a child.
And there are a lot of families who have a lot to say that don't adopt or take, or they don't take
Right.
in foster children.
Right.
And they should. And also there's an awful lot of crack babies.
Well, there aren't, now see, this is something that you're moving into the next area that is my expertise, but I don't often talk about it. But that is the breakdown of the family that is growing our government. I mean, if you stop and think about it, every time we have a disaster that occurs in the family, then you have an agency that comes in and wants to support it in some way. And that's how we grow government. And if we really want to reduce government, we encourage our nonprofits to come up and take their place again. And instead of letting the government constantly do everything. We as a society do not ever want to deny someone who is disabled in any way an opportunity to have help and support. But certainly it shouldn't be your responsibility to pay for me if I'm making bad choices. If I'm going out and shooting up with drugs, or if I'm doing things, making bad choices as far as my employment goes, it shouldn't be up to you to pay for my bad choices. I should have to live with them and maybe learn and not make that choice again. So you didn't go on the wrong direction. Yes.
One thing you talk about, break up the family. Of course, as you all know, heroin has just pretty much overtaken not only this area, but pretty much almost the United States wide. And part of that reason has been welfare. Since unconstitutionally, welfare was just open up to everybody, heroin has just exploded in this country. What would your ideas be on welfare?
Well, we had a good system going when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, and Bill Clinton actually signed into law the welfare reform. That was really working. And then the current leadership came in and just said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to give everybody everything we can give them, including extending their unemployment. And so now we don't know where we are really. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges, go down and figure out what are the real numbers and where are we really? Because we've got, about 25 to 27% of our population that isn't even working now. But we're not counting them when we're talking about unemployment. We talk about the consumer price index and how it's, it's about 3 or 4%, but we're not counting housing or food or clothing or transportation. If you're not comparing those things, what are they living on? It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's going to be a big challenge. But absolutely, going back to a form, Sweden, which is probably one of the most liberal places there are, actually found out that when you reduce the number of weeks that someone is on unemployment, 2 weeks before they get ready to get off of unemployment, or that it's going to run out, they usually find a job.
Yeah.
And that's still true. When people find, I heard a lady on the radio, she was in Austin, and she was talking to him about the fact that, she said, would you, if somebody gave you $1 million, would you not work? And her point is that she gets aid to dependent mother, or what is it, aid to children, ADC. She gets unemployment. She was going through all of this, and it amounted to $3,000 or $4,000 a year. And she said, and so the guy said to her, if you didn't get that, what would you do? And she said, I'd go out and get a job. And if we're paying them $19 an hour, why do they want to go work for 6 or 7?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Yes?
I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't absolutely agree with everything you've said. Practical politics, we've got somebody with a ton of money parachuting into the state. How do you plan to cope with that?
Doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is going around and talking to people face to face. Have you seen him? Has he come up and shaken your hand?
No.
Has he been honest with you and told you what his positions are? that method, in fact, whenever I've run for office or even encouraged people to run for office, I've always said, you need somebody from New Hampshire who understands New Hampshire, because we are not one that you can come in and just, blanket us with a lot of media and we'll all follow as sheeple going along the line. New Hampshire people want to meet you, they want to talk to you, they want to look you in the eye, and they want to make sure that they can trust you. They may not agree with everything that you're saying, but they want to know that if you say that you're going to do something, that you will do it, and that they can talk to you and that you'll listen to them. So that's how you really combat it. However, you also brought it up. We need money, and we can't do it just on a shoestring. So anything you can contribute would be fantastic. One of the things that did come out in the last FEC report, although we didn't raise a whole lot of money. I'm not so sure that the other campaigns did. I know at least one of them put in a whole bunch of their own funds. But we did have more contributors across the board than any of the other candidates combined. So that is how we do it, is grassroots, knocking on doors, talking to people, getting on the radio, doing as much as I can to utilize the free things that we can. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
What is your view on the federal minimum wage?
The minimum wage actually kills jobs. When we allow, I'm sure there was a time when unions were valuable and that we should have them because there were abuses going on. But today, when we've got government unions, that shouldn't be. But the minimum wage actually kills jobs, because when you mandate to somebody that they have to raise their wages that they're paying to somebody else or to their employees, that now has raised their overhead, and they now will probably either lay somebody off or they'll pass that money or that cost on to somebody, to their goods. But the problem with that is what happens if you have to raise the cost of your goods to the point where you can't compete any longer? It doesn't work. I haven't heard that conversation.
I would like to know, if you're fortunate enough to serve us in DC, how are you going to deal with that really ugly word, the C word? I don't mean cancer, I mean compromise. When I look at this country, Republicans have been compromising away our liberty for more than 100 years to the progressives. So we need to stand on principle, in my opinion. And quite honestly, while I'm a peaceful person, take the gloves off. I don't know how you can call somebody your friend across the aisle when you're trying to ruin my life. And that's what they're trying to do.
Well, I'm not going to be fair with them a whole lot. I'll be fair with them. I'm not going to be nice to them a whole lot. It's the same story that you run into with your kids when they come home from school and they say, Mom, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I stay out until 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning? And you turn around and you say, because you live in this house, you're putting your feet under my table and I'm having to pay for it, so you will live by my rules. Well, the same thing goes down in Washington, D.C. You don't want to give me that special committee assignment? Fine, don't give it to me. I don't need it. I'll go over here and I'll do whatever I can. I'll still do my job. You can put me down in the basement, in the corner office, way down where it's cold. I'll be fine. I can walk all over that Capitol. You just have to be willing to say no. Or in some cases, you have to be able to say, this is really important, and if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to tell the people back home, and they will listen to me. And I'm going to get them to call you, and then you tell me what you're going to do. Look at what happened to Boehner when they were still kicking the can down the road with another CR, continuing resolution, and he started to back down when the people got upset about it. So we have a lot of power in our voices. We just have to exercise it. Well, TestermanPresenter.com, we have literature, In the back, and we have a sign-up sheet in the back. Testerman4Senate.com takes credit cards if you want to send some money that way. That's absolutely fair, acceptable, and very, very helpful. Thank you very much for having me.
Get some help putting the chairs back.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.